Alright folks, today I want to review another Angus trim sword, or rather give you my impression of, I suppose, because this doesn't technically fall under a full review by my standards, simply because I haven't been able to do a lot of testing with it. I got this a while ago on Kult of Athena when it popped up in the pre-owned section. This is a one-of-a-kind piece, and yeah, has just been too much stuff and not enough time to really do a whole lot with it. There was one tatami cutting session where we got in one cut with it. We just had so many different swords that we wanted to try out, and this one just kind of got the short end of the tatami roll, however you want to look at it. And I like it, but it's not among my absolute top favorites, which means that it won't escape the big liquidation sale before the move to Nova Scotia, because you don't want to haul any more than necessary when moving across the entire country. Anyway, so yeah, this is kind of loosely based on historical swords. I reviewed a single-handed falchion made by Angus trim not long ago, and basically it's the same blade. This is just longer, but otherwise it looks pretty much the exact same. It's the same kind of clip point, pretty long drawn out point, same sharpening on the false edge there, same overall blade profile, and it feels pretty similar, except it's the two-handed version. Now the guard is different than on the other falchion. This is really more of a arming sword slash longsword guard. The grip is very different, and the pommel is pretty standard, so to speak. The point on this one is also quite thin, just like on the single-handed one. This one did not come bend when I received it, so I didn't have to modify it. I think this may not be quite as drawn out as the other. It seems slightly thicker, although I may be wrong on that. I'm just kind of eyeballing it. I already talked quite a bit about historical falchions, both in the review of the single-handed Angus trim falchion and also in the video that was about messers versus falchions, where I went through what the differences are and all that, so we don't have to do that again now. In terms of handling, this one, aside from the asymmetrical handle shape, feels a lot like a longsword. Like when you pick this up, you know, just moving around, absolutely this feels exactly like a lot of, well, well-made longswords, let's put it that way. Same kind of grip length. You have plenty of space for both hands, even with gloves, especially if you ride down a little bit on the pommel. But I think this is more in the hand and a half category, or bastard sword category, because this still feels light enough that you could use this with one hand without great difficulty. So either works fine. It's not going to be quite as agile with one hand, of course, as opposed to two, but this overall seems very lively. When you pick this up, like it immediately just compels you to swing it, and just kind of wants to sing through the air, so to speak. Oh, it sounds so pretentious. Anyway, so very, very well balanced. The weight is very good, and just overall, it flows in the hand. If you've picked up a well-designed sword, you definitely know the difference between one that's kind of a dead metal bar and one that's very lively in the balance. So that's excellent. The grip, I don't know. I'm still not entirely sure what I think about it. When I first saw that, the asymmetrical grip, I was kind of like, I don't know. It seems such a strange choice. But when I picked it up, I thought, you know what? This does work. Like, it's not uncomfortable. It gives you a very secure grip. It has several risers and is done basically the same way as Albion does it. For example, with a really tight wrap that's not going to come loose. Great cross-section. You can very easily feel the edge alignment. It's just a little weird to have this sort of bump here where it tapers only on one side. If I could redesign it, I think I would just make it symmetrical instead. I don't think it's really a problem worth criticizing, because it still works fine, and even with longsword techniques where you switch and cut with the false edge, you can still do that. without a problem, really. So I can't actually say anything against it. It's just a little strange. I can't say I'm a fan of it. Let's put it that way, even though it works. And I'm definitely not a fan of the aesthetic. Sure, with an asymmetrical single edge blade, it makes certain sense. I can say that. I just can't say that I'm really a fan of the look of it. It's nice that it's dark green though. Favorite color. What I do very much like is the bluing on the guard and pommel. Depending on the light, it can look relatively subtle. In some lighting, it looks more like just darker steel. Hopefully I can show that well in the video with proper color balancing and all that. But basically it is more of a dark gray than a true black, and it's got a little bit of a bluish tint to it. Looks great in my opinion. The fit on the guard, as is to be expected from Angus trim, is excellent. You can see the way it was slotted to make sure that it fits the tang and the blade very well, so there's no movement there. This is actually peened on top of the pommel. You can see there where the tang was hammered down. Angus trim often does the nut construction, where you have a recessed nut that can be loosened and tightened with an Allen key. In this case, you went for peened, which is the historically accurate option, but at the same time, this is not a historical design to begin with. Personally, I don't mind either way in this case, because I know how good his recessed nut construction and peen construction is. He nails it every time, so not an issue. The edge is great, again, as is to be expected from an Angus trim sword. He does a very good job sharpening them. It's got a nice flat grind from the spine to the edge bevel, just like the single-handed falchion, which cut very nicely. Just goes through the target with minimal resistance. You just got to get the edge alignment right, and it will cut like a champ. The blade is nice and rigid, and the center of percussion is basically right under the sharpened section, so that makes it easy to tell. And as long as you're in that kind of area, it's going to cut without a problem. So all we got out of it is one cut on a tatami mat with a wooden dowel on side, which went through effortlessly, even though the edge alignment was a bit off, as you can see in the slow-mo. So it's definitely a forgiving kind of blade. And I also did some tests on the ballistic gel dummy. Oh, that was pretty good. I cut deeply into it, which is difficult with that material because it's got a lot of friction and it's very bouncy. So a lot of blades will just bounce back without cutting too deeply. This did pretty well. That basically split the entire neck. It did better than a lot of blades I've tested on the ballistic gel. Thrusts also, no problem. Again, relatively rigid, so that helps with that. And the blade tapers quite a bit, so it does pretty well. It's not really optimized for thrusting. It's really more of a cutting blade, but it does that just fine. In terms of criticisms, I don't really have much of anything. As said, the grip I would personally prefer if it was symmetrical. It's a little bit strange, and maybe the point is really thin. So personally, I would prefer if there was a little bit more meat in it, because this is somewhat prone to damage, as we've seen with a single-handed falchion. So I think a bit less aggressive distal taper would work, because I mean, you can see how wide this is at the base. It doesn't have to be quite this thin to be this lively, but it's about it, aside from the price, of course. And that's the general issue, of course, with higher end reproductions. I don't quite remember the exact amount. It was somewhere in the $1,200 to $1,500 ballpark. So obviously that's quite a pile of money. Basically every time I review a high quality sword, that's always what I have to point out. It's a lot of money to spend, but it is worth it, you know, just in terms of the quality that you get, because there is a major difference between a $1,200 and a $200 sword. I mean, that better be, right? It's not to say that $200 swords can't be good. I've recommended a number of them. It's just that if you put them side by side, it would be a very unfair comparison, because this is going to feel and perform substantially better. Anyway, so yeah, basically I would keep it if not for the move. I like it quite a bit, but I really have to narrow it down to the absolute favorites that I bring along. Anyway, I hope you found the review interesting. Thanks for watching, and have a good one, folks.